Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Phil Bliss, founder and CEO of Canada's podcast, coming to you today from Toronto. We're going to meet Robert Saunders, who's the founder and CEO of Doormat, a tech company that wants to make real estate transactions dead simple. Buying and selling properties in Canada shouldn't be so complicated, and they're on a mission to simplify the process by pairing modern technology with top-tier service. Robert is a creative and self-motivated software engineer and entrepreneur. He's always been driven to build products that excel other people's lives and has a deep passion for technology. So, Robert, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to meet you. I think your particular area is interesting because lots of people, buy houses and things like that, and the story's pretty solid as well. So, just sort of to put the thing in context, why don't we get you get a little bit deep into who Robert Saunders is, a little bit about how you got to where you are, and the solution that you saw as an opportunity, if you like.
Totally. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Philip. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess starting a bit about myself. So, hi everyone, my name is Robert. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Doormat, which is an online real estate legal services company. I'll get into the story about how Doormat came to be in just a moment, but a little bit about myself. So I grew up in Toronto, always been in love with computers and building things, and really kind of my passion for technology came from a very young age. So my dad is had a long career in technology, and so a lot of that inspiration came from him. And throughout high school and university, I was always building apps and was fascinated by mobile devices. And so one of my earliest memories of getting into technology was when the iPhone 4 came out in 2010 or 2011. I was in high school. And when the iPhone came out, I was really kind of taken aback by the design and the ease of use of what was ultimately just a rectangle that you could interact with your finger. And so my school at the time had a website where students could see their homework online, and it wasn't very mobile friendly. And so right when that happened, I quickly realized an opportunity there to make a mobile version. And that was one of the first apps that I ever made. So in high school, I self-taught myself to build that app so students at my school could see their homework on their phone. And through that experience, I fell in love with the act of building, which ultimately is what I know entrepreneurship to be right now. And so quickly, I launched that app to my school, released it to them, and I started to feel the results of what it's like to build something. So I stood up in my assembly and I shared the app, and I have a vivid memory of getting a standing ovation and people clapping for me. And then people in the hallways coming up to me in my locker saying, "Hey, this is such a cool app. This is so exciting. I have this feature for you. I have this feature for you." And that kind of kickstarted my journey into entrepreneurship and the love of building things. And so obviously I was quite young at the time. And my parents weren't too keen on me wanting to stop school and start to go build ventures myself. And so throughout the rest of high school and throughout university, I went to Queen's University, which is just a couple of hours outside of Toronto, and I studied computer engineering there. I continued to build things on the side. And ultimately, because I found that through building, I was learning more than what the curriculum was teaching me. And so that's kind of been my path to where I am now. Is I've always been a builder. I've always loved getting the feedback from the things that I build and actually seeing the impact that they have on people. And so shortly after university, I started working at Shopify. And when I was at Shopify, I worked on the API patterns team. And on that team, I worked on the platform side of Shopify, which gave me really good exposure to, how to build APIs and platforms at scale. And I quickly realized that I wanted to get back into the consumer side of things and build solutions for consumers. And so while I was at Shopify, I transitioned over to the Shop app, which is their consumer app that's competing with Amazon. And through that, I worked on the conversion team, building product features and enhancements that ultimately got people to buy more things, which was very cool. But ultimately, I had always wanted to go and do my own thing. And my experience at Shopify was really rooted in just getting the skill sets to build something at scale. And I was waiting for the idea to come to me about, what I should build. And that's kind of where the origin of Doormat comes from. At the start of the pandemic, I was looking to buy a property. And obviously I'd never been through the residential home buying property purchase process before. And I was working with my real estate agent to find a property. And once I'd found that property, I quickly put in an offer. And my agent had said, do you have a real estate lawyer? And so it was news to me at the time that you needed a real estate lawyer to buy property in Canada. I had no idea what a real estate lawyer was or what they did. And so I ended up just taking the recommendation for a lawyer that they gave me. And so quickly worked through that process. I worked with my real estate lawyer and found it to be an experience that didn't really match my consumer expectations. So obviously being a younger millennial, I'm akin to all of the different digital services that are out there today. And I'm the first person to to use any online service that I can, whether that be like filing my taxes, booking my hair appointment, all these things. And so when I worked with my lawyer, everything was being done in what felt like a very traditional way. Going into the lawyer's office to sign the documents, to transfer the money, drop off the check, pick up the keys. And then also everything was being done through email, getting asked questions about, what's your insurance binder? I didn't know what an insurance binder was, or sending documents back and forth. And so I quickly found that there was an opportunity to streamline that process and make it better for consumers. And so while I was working at Shopify on weekends and nights, I worked with somebody else that I found in my network who's a real estate lawyer to better understand what the process of what a real estate lawyer does. Because obviously I have no background in real estate law, and trying to build a consumer app for residential property closings, I needed some help. And so I quickly found Ben, who is now one of my co-founders at Doormat. And we worked together to better understand, could we apply technology and build software for residential property closings that brought transparency, reduced price, and gave time savings to consumers. And so over the course of last year, we built an MVP product that we brought to market this past February. And since then, we've done over 60 transactions through the platform. And we've raised a bit of venture funding, which is very exciting. And yeah, that's been our journey so far. We're still very early in our process, but really kind of the foundation for Doormat came rooted from my own personal experience of going through the residential property closing process.
Really interesting to hear the story, and sort of obviously you're following your passion in terms of application development and on that front, but it's interesting to hear how you progressed from Shopify, the kind of employer-employee thing. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, Shopify is a damn good operation. That's fine, and transition out in terms of getting on the journey, you're stepping out of it is, why didn't you just quit and get some friends to fund you and get there faster, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, you think, was your approach the right logic, do you think, to get to where you wanted to be?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's funny, some people ask me, if you were to restart and do it all over again, what would you do differently? And one of my answers to that question is saying I would start sooner. And also it kind of, my advice to any, potential entrepreneur or people who are looking to do their own thing is to just start, and that there's never a right time. I think I definitely fell into a bit of a trap when I was at Shopify, in the sense of I needed to build the conviction in the idea. And I think this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs feel is, no matter how much you believe in your idea or how passionate you are about the problem space, like there is this like big chasm that you have to jump from when you leave that stable job that pays you a really good salary and that's comfortable. And so I think it's a different journey for everyone in terms of how you jump that chasm. And so for me, when I was at Shopify, one thing that I was doing constantly was just trying to build up that conviction and remove any doubt in my idea by building out the founding team, and figuring out who I was going to do this with, who were the right people to do it with, and also better understand if it was a problem that was worth solving. So, while I was at Shopify, I was interviewing recent home buyers and home sellers to understand like what their process was with their lawyer, to understand if, the experience that I had with my lawyer was something that was common. And that process helped me build that conviction to leave. But I mean, ultimately, I think to your point, why didn't I do it sooner? If I were to go back, I definitely would have. And I think like an interesting point of that question is like the funding. I think like a big part of my journey was as soon as I did quit, I had to go find funding because I just bought a property and I have a mortgage to carry now, which is kind of funny as it relates to kind of the problem that we're solving with doormat. I was incredibly lucky that when I quit Shopify, one of the VP of products at Shopify gave us our first seed angel investment. And he was kind of a catalyst for us to take it a lot more serious, because he knew that we had this problem that was worth solving, but also that we just needed to be given a shot. And he really enabled that through the funding. And so I guess to your point of like, why didn't you go to people and get funding? Ultimately, that's what we did. And ultimately, I don't think I had I didn't recognize that there is, especially in Toronto and in kind of the tech community in general, there is this like large group of supporters that are more than happy to, support entrepreneurs and people that have dreams and visions. And I don't think that was particularly clear to me at the time because I hadn't been through it. The thought of somebody giving me money to go do this thing that, I really believed in, it was something that I didn't quite understand that was like available to people. And, if I was to say anything to anyone else, like if you have a good idea, you put all the right things in place, you do some work, to get it off the ground, there is that support there for you. And looking back, I would have, made that transition from full-time Shopify to full-time doormat a little sooner, knowing that now.
What do you like most? Well, having stepped out of the corporate world, what do you like most about being an entrepreneur?
That's a really good question. I think like the number one thing is, the feeling of impact and the freedom of the work that you get to do. one thing that I particularly felt at Shopify, I was at Shopify. I started in 2018 as an intern there, and I kind of saw the company grow from, I was in the first 6,000 employees, and then throughout those years, it grew to be much, much bigger. Obviously through the COVID pandemic, and I saw the company change quite a lot. I was in a small office when I started, and I finished in an office, and then I finished remote. So the company itself grew quite a lot. And what I was increasingly feeling was I was feeling like kind of a cog in the machine. Shopify is a massive company now. And that impact that I felt as an earlier employee there was starting to kind of fade because the company was just getting bigger and doing more things. And so what I was working on didn't feel as impactful. And so I think being an entrepreneur, one of the best aspects of it is that you have total freedom and you clock in, clock out, not from 9 to 5. It's whenever you want. And you also can have real tangible impact in what you're building every day. And also just the journey itself is such an interesting thing, like going from the highs and lows to, talking with investors, trying to, story tell your way into getting some funding and sharing that product, building the product, staying late up at night, and then seeing the fruits of your labor at the end of it is such an exciting path to be on.
So what do you think your business is going to be in the next 5 years?
It's a good question. I think like what we're focusing on, and if you say like where we're going to be in 5 years, I don't actually quite know because every year or every month feels like a year at the current stage. Right now, what we're focusing on is building the world's best closing process for residential properties in Ontario. Where I see us going is bringing that nationwide. So, building Canada's real estate lawyer, the first consumer brand for real estate law. If you think of, real estate law in Canada, there's not a single consumer brand that comes to mind. Much like when you think of, banking or like simple banking in Canada, you think of like Wealthsimple or the big banks. Mm-hmm. In real estate law, there isn't that. It's a market that's traditionally dominated by smaller law firms that focus on very geographic specific areas. So, if you're Toronto, there's a handful of lawyers in Toronto specifically, or in Mississauga or Brampton or wherever. What we're really aspiring to do with Doormat is build that consumer brand around real estate law so that when you want to close on your property or do your mortgage refinance, you think of Doormat like you think of TurboTax when, it comes to be your tax season. That's one aspect. And I think like one thing that's quite interesting about the space that we're operating in is that there hasn't been this, a consumer brand for real estate law yet. And it's primarily driven by regulation, but also, lack of adoption of innovation in the legal tech space. And prop tech in general. There are just a couple of industries that are a little bit behind some of the others in terms of adoption of that tech. And I think there's a big opportunity for us to step in and kind of fulfill that mission. And then outside of just taking our current product and applying it nationwide, I think one thing that's really cool is being able to expand along the home ownership journey. So, one thing that became apparent to me when I was buying my property was I didn't need a real estate agent. I didn't need a mortgage broker, but I fundamentally needed a real estate lawyer to do the deal. In Canada, you need a real estate lawyer. They're the only people who transact on a residential property. They're the only people who can transfer title from one person to another. And what's unique about their position in the home ownership journey is that they're the ones who fundamentally give you the keys at the end of the day. They're the ones who ask for all your information about your property transaction. And I think there's a big opportunity for us to expand along the home ownership journey. So, once we close a property, maybe we help them move into their property. Like, here's some movers for your move. or once they're in their property, maybe, through our platform, you could see your investment portfolio, your real estate investment portfolio, because you closed on your property with doormat, and you could track the value of the property over time. Or similarly, we could help with insurance. One of the things we have to ask our clients is, where are you getting your insurance from? It's very real that we could have an embedded insurance product where we can offer property insurance directly in our product, because you're already closing with doormat and we know that you're going to need it. And so I think right now what we're focused on is building, that world's best property closing experience, and really focusing on the niche of that real estate law piece of it. But where we'd like to go as a company is expand along the homeownership journey and expand across Canada.
So in terms of sort of growth, this is business advice, what's the best piece of advice that you've received that you kind of, it's there, it's in your back pocket kind of thing, that you carry around with you?
There's been lots of advice. I think that's one thing that you are lucky, but also it's like a gift and a curse as an entrepreneur. There's a lot of people who have lots of really good thoughts and experiences to share with you. But the problem with it is there's so many different pathways that you can take from that advice and experience, and it can be hard to pick which is the best for you. And so what I often tell people, who are kind of going through the same thing, or I talk about with my founder friends, is, how do you kind of parse the good advice from the bad advice? And ultimately, kind of what we come back to is you kind of just have to do it yourself to understand what works. Sure, there are like course correcting advice that can be really helpful. But ultimately, and what I'm realizing as a first time entrepreneur is that there's an element of it where you just need to experience it so that you can learn for yourself. And so that's not to say that I don't have any advice. I think, one thing that recently resonated with me, that was told to me by another founder, very successful multi-time founder, was that you have to be unreasonable as an entrepreneur. And so he asked me this really good question, which was, what's the most unreasonable thing that you've done? And he said, I asked that to everyone every founder that I meet, because entrepreneurs have to be unreasonable. And, what does it mean to be unreasonable? It means to think that, your vision of the world, it's probably unreasonable. It's unreasonable to think that, we're going to be a real estate law firm that everyone in Canada, thinks to use. That's unreasonable. But entrepreneurs are built on being unreasonable and having these crazy visions. And so I don't really know where I was going with that one, but that resonated with me because in that kind of back pocket that you mentioned, I'm always asking myself, how am I being unreasonable? And where can we be different as a team? And so anyways, that particular advice resonated with me recently.
Okay, so let's get a little less serious. Let's go one or two fun questions. What book are you currently reading, listening to, and would recommend? Not necessarily the one that you're reading would recommend, but something that you've read that is one of those that made you think, made you make some good decisions afterwards.
Yeah. So I haven't been reading too much recently. So I'll say that off the bat.
I did see a book in the back there.
Yes, I do have books. They go on my shelf. And unfortunately, one of the things with being an entrepreneur is that you don't have a ton of extra time. I am trying to practice the art of reading a little bit more. But what I will say, one book that I did read very early on in the journey of doormat and entrepreneurship was The Lean Startup. I think every entrepreneur should read that book. It's a very good book that teaches you, how to build startups from experiences that, have worked in the past. And then also 0 to 1 is another good book. But yeah, I'm not currently reading anything. So yeah.
Are you a morning or a night person?
I'm a morning person.
Morning. Okay. That's, you belong to the majority there. That's kind of.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would it be and why would you choose the word?
That's a very good question. Oof. I would probably say there's a few words that come to mind, but I would say I'll go with the first one. I'll say creative. I think why I'm creative is because I am constantly finding creative solutions to the problems that I'm having, and have always. And actually, going back to one of your earlier questions, which is talking about what you love about entrepreneurship. One thing I love about entrepreneurship is you can really unleash your creativity because you have full ownership of what you're doing. And I would say creativity resonates with me the most because I'm always applying myself in creative ways. And specifically, building the product that is Doormat, I've had to be creative in so many different ways to just understand, what the process is of a residential property closing. How can we synthesize that into a consumer experience that is super simple and super delightful for people to use. So whether that be, designing the user interface or designing the architecture for the code, the job that I'm currently doing and have always done is always tapping into a level of creativity that's required to get kind of the desired result that we need. And so yeah, I would say one of my best traits is creativity.
What's keeping you up at night?
No, these are good questions. I love them. I would just say everything that is the business. So yeah, there's no shortage of things to do as an entrepreneur. And one thing that I'm constantly doing when I go to bed is just thinking about what I'm going to do tomorrow and what needs to be done, what hasn't been done. And that's been something that's been keeping me up recently. Funnily enough that you asked this question, one of our investors, I was talking to them about this problem of how do you disconnect from your company so that you can have good sleep? And it's kind of funny. He was saying, why don't you just read a book before you go to bed? So maybe I have to read a little bit more before I go to bed.
That's one of my escapes is that in terms of getting away from the company and just moving into something else. Kind of.
Yeah, he was saying that if it doesn't even matter what book that you read, you just have to open up the book and just read a few pages, and that just will focus your mind somewhere else. And he's like, you are tired. You're not tired. And so through the act of reading, you're just going to separate your brain and you'll fall asleep very quickly. So I think I need to, based on your question before, what book you're reading, I didn't have a good answer for that. And then now this question, I think the answer to my problems is just to read some books. So I'll get to work on that. Yeah.
Robert, that's about it in terms of the time frame. But it's been really interesting, and thank you very much for coming on Canada's podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Philip. This has been a lot of fun.